Hello and welcome to The Squeaky Wheel, our newly rebranded podcast that unpacks policy, industry and more across cycling, walking and all other forms of micromobility. My name is Phil Latz and I've been squeaking via various cycling media and charity activities for over 40 years.
And I'm Irene McAleese, co-founder of the cycling technology and data company CSense. And we're on a mission to help cities transform for more cycling and micromobility using data. Today, we are very excited to be speaking with Sara Stace. Sara is a city shaper. She graduated as an architect and urban designer and has worked in these professions within Australia and abroad. She's really an innovator on cities, land use, urban transport, economics, an all-round Wonder Woman actually, because not long after I first met Sara at a Velo City, I started following her on LinkedIn. And one of the first pictures I saw of Sara was Sara dressed in full Wonder Woman garb doing a marathon in Sydney. And that image of Sara as Wonder Woman has actually always stuck in my mind. And it's a pretty fair picture to have of Sara because when you look at her CV, she's worked in federal, state, local governments, private sector for 30 years. She's on the board and the treasurer of World Cycling Alliance. She is now president of Better Streets Australia, and we're going to hear a lot more about that today in our discussions. And she's also served on the boards across lots of different government and advocacy sectors. Not only that, Sara is well known for co-authoring over 30 publications and policy papers for the likes of United Nations, Australian government and others. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yes, Sara, thanks for being our very first guest on our newly rebranded Squeaky Wheel podcast. Now, you've got a plan that some would say is audacious. I totted up the numbers and I think over the next 25 years, you're going to ask the federal government for $10 billion. So, as Pauline Hanson might have once said, can you please explain?
Well, as you know, I'm always doing audacious things, Phil. I think it's easier to break it down a bit more into chunk-sized pieces. So what we're actually asking for is just $15 per person annually from the Australian government. So that we sort of probably scale it down a bit to 10 years over the United Nations decade for sustainable transport, which runs from 2026 to 2036. And during that time, we're asking for $400 million annually from the Australian government, and then that would be matched by state and territory governments. So that's $15 per person. Over the last 20 years, the Australian government has spent just 90 cents per person. It's actually probably more like 80 cents, but to be generous, we've said, let's give them a slight contingency on that at 90 cents per person. And that's over a 20-year period. And that even includes the $100 million that they've dedicated for the next 4 years for active transport. I mean, you really couldn't buy very much. I asked my kids, what could you buy for 90 cents at the shop? And they said, absolutely nothing, Mum. So we're asking the Australian government to buy us 2.5 coffees for the next a year.
Yeah.
For the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And out of that, we want to build essentially 15 regional city networks. So I don't know if you're familiar with what Wagga Wagga has done, but for $17 million in a 4-year period, they built 56 kilometres of their walking and cycling network. And that's been hugely popular with the local population and has had some incredible wins out of that. So I can go into that in more detail later.
Yeah.
We want to fund 4 cycling superhighways. So that is to build 4 capital cities, the 4 biggest ones in Australia, so Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. All of those are already on the Infrastructure Australia priority list. So they've already been shortlisted by the Infrastructure Australia as the independent body saying these are worthwhile investments, but there's been no money put up to fund those 4 big projects. And then we think that you'd have some e-bike subsidy programs similar to those in Tasmania and Queensland. And then we also think in order to do this delivery in the 10-year time period, this is a completely different thing that we've never done before. So I actually think the Australian government needs to set up within the Department of Infrastructure a unit that's dedicated to supporting states and local governments to deliver those networks that we're talking about. So they're the 4 things that we want to see come out of this $400 million a year or $15 per person annually.
Yeah.
And that would get $40 billion in economic benefits to the nation.
Yeah. Wow. That's fantastic ambition. There's a lot to unpack there. I guess we'll take first things first. This ask is coming from yourself being positioned in the role as president of Better Streets. Could you firstly tell us a little bit about Better Streets and what Better Streets' mission is and how you're positioned there to sort of pitch this ask?
Yeah, so the Better Streets is essentially, it's an idea that we've imported from the UK. So one of our co-founders, Megan Sharkey, did her PhD on Better Streets in the UK. And then we've imported that idea into Australia. So we've set up as a national charity. We've just now got tax deductibility status as an environmental charity organisation.
Fantastic.
And essentially what we do is we're here to bring lots of voices together around 5 key asks, which I'll go through in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've found is that by amplifying that message, we're going to get a lot more traction. So it doesn't matter whether you're a parent at a school or a teacher or a software engineer or mum or dad, person who is a driver, etc. It doesn't matter who you represent, and you can represent lots of those things. But essentially, as long as you agree on our 5 things, you can sign up to be a member or be a supporter. So our 5 asks are that we want to get more kids walking and cycling to school.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of, it used to be that about 75% of Australian kids caught public transport, walked or biked, and that's flipped the other way around. So that's one of our ambitions. We don't think it's too much to ask, really. The second one is that we want to have safer streets, local streets, and that in order to do that, we think you need 30 kilometres an hour on the sort of more quiet residential streets as well as at major shopping streets.
Yeah.
And places like Wales has been really exemplary on that. We had Lee Waters out in Australia last year to talk about that for Wales. Our third key ask is that we want to put in more pedestrian crossings. Literally just being able to cross the street is a really basic fundamental component that you need for walking. It's not good enough just to have footpaths. You need to be able to cross the street. So we recommend that every council install 20 new crossings a year or upgrades. And then we wanted to support local businesses by doing streetscape upgrades, so things like outdoor parklets, more trees and vegetation and so on, because we do want to support small business in all of this. And then our 5th key ask is around building separated cycling infrastructure that's safe for people to ride on, or they can go on 30-kilometre-an-hour streets where it's calm enough to do so. So I guess Better Streets is united around all of those 5 key asks, and what we do is bring together those various organisations that I mentioned, whether you're a Heart Foundation or a walking body or whatever it is, you can be a member and sign up. And then together with that message, we take that amplified message through to politicians. That's our target audience.
Okay.
And the idea behind is when you do go to a politician, when we go and talk to them, we say we are a whole voice of different parts of society. We're not representing just people who ride bikes, for example. And I think that's the way we get much more cut through.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a little bit like, I think, as Lee Waters also mentioned when we spoke with him, is that it's very hard for somebody to argue about improvements to the street that make life better for everybody in society, not just cyclists or one particular group that they might think that are narrowly benefiting. It's actually a wider benefit for everybody by having less pollution, safer streets, etc., more people travelling to businesses, and there's a wide remit there. And it's also a nice way to bring together lots of different advocacy groups under one umbrella as well, from what you're saying. So you could have the Heart Foundation or others join and you can come together with one voice.
Yeah, that's right. So organisations can continue to do, advocacy organisations can continue to do what they do. We're not replacing what anybody else does. What we're doing is creating a bit of an alliance, a partnership with others in order to take these issues forward. And then we also have, I guess, an option if there's a group of people who don't have a current advocacy organisation that represents what they need, they can then take on Better Streets as their umbrella. So, for example, there's Better Streets in Lewisham or there's Better Streets Lane Cove, and so they can create a Better Streets Brisbane. you can use the Better Streets IP with it's completely open and transparent. All our information, our banner, logo, etc., is all open source,
and it's all volunteer led and run. Fantastic. So this is providing you with a great platform then to go with this ask, and I think it's quite mind-blowing when you kind of say, actually, we're asking for 2 cups of coffee per person, which is really what it equates to now. The price of coffee is definitely going up, so $15 a head is very reasonable over that 10-year period as well. So I think it's fair to say Australia is really behind in a lot of other countries that are spending significantly more. Could you maybe contrast what, 90 cents in Australia, what else is happening around the world in cities that you're seeing with the spends that they're doing on infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, we always look to Europe and we say Copenhagen's wonderful and the whole Netherlands is wonderful, etc. I think we can point to places like Paris, obviously, that has gone from being pretty unfriendly for bikes to being absolutely amazing for bikes in a really, really short period of time. Unfortunately, I just don't think that a lot of that gets cut through. So where we are trying to also say is China, actually, which is right on our doorstep here in Australia, has changed. They used to be the kingdom of bikes, and then they decided to invest much more in driving motorways and also investment in public transport. And they've come to realise that, in fact, that's just a geometric impossibility. You need to provide for people to walk and bike, and in particular that people need to be able to get to the metro on the share bikes that we see everywhere that have come out of China originally. And so they've completely switched their thinking. You're seeing cities like Beijing and Tianjin investing a lot more in bikes. And they want to be more like the Amsterdam was. They want to be the new Amsterdam. So I think that that's really important that we turn to some of our neighbours. Same with Japan. You can ride a bike pretty much anywhere in Japan, in your local neighbourhoods. It's not because they've invested a lot in separated cycling infrastructure there. It's about having really quiet, slow traffic speeds on local residential streets. So basically, a lot of cities and countries are spending between 10 and 20% of their transport budget on active transport, on walking and cycling. So even places like Ireland allocates 10% each for walking and cycling, so that's 20% in total. Whereas our ask would be just 1.6% of the federal transport budget if they funded $15 per person. Mm-hmm. That means at the moment it's less than 0.1%, which is pretty pathetic.
Yeah.
And it's why we're not getting anywhere. It's why we're not seeing any change.
So, Sarah, one thing I'm a bit intrigued about is you mentioned this Infrastructure Australia priority list. What is that? How do you get a project onto that? And what's on there currently that we need to know about?
Yeah, so Infrastructure Australia, I used to work there for 6 years, way back from its inception in 2008. And essentially on the infrastructure priority list, the idea behind that is that proponents, which are basically state governments, can put forward to Infrastructure Australia any project that's over $200 million must go through Infrastructure Australia. Actually, they may have dropped that to 100 million. I'll have to double check that. Mm-hmm. So once it hits over that threshold, it has to go to Infrastructure Australia for them to do an independent assessment of its merits. And that includes looking at the benefit cost ratio of that project. So a benefit cost ratio is for every dollar you spend, how much do you get back to the economy? So cycling projects generally get around $5 back for every dollar that you spend. So that's a benefit cost ratio of 5 to 1. Most of the other projects, particularly road projects, will just pip over the 1 post. They might get sort of 1.2-ish. So cycling and walking do really, really stack up very well. And so what those states have done is they've put a bundle together, a whole program of work. So they're not putting forward one cycleway. They've bundled up things that'll sit over $200 million. Some of them sit into the multi-billion-dollar projects that go up to Infrastructure Australia for the priority list. So as I said, you've got Perth, Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney all sitting on that list now. The problem is, so they've had to have done a business case to get to that point. Mm-hmm. The problem is that they need to do the next stages of business cases, and each state government is at a different level for that. But ultimately, someone has to come up with the money in the first place. These don't just suddenly appear out of nowhere. And that's what we're trying to do, is say, right, we'll get to it. It's on the list. Let's get them funded and on the way.
Wow, so there's already a fully costed benefit cost. Everything is worked out. It's a great plan. It's sitting there. It's ready to go, and it needs money.
It's of merit. This stacks up against any other type of transport or infrastructure investment that's already on the list. There's no reason for it not to be funded and go ahead. It just needs the political willpower to do so.
Gosh.
Now, I might jump in there about political willpower, because you've mentioned to me before, when asking politicians, government for policy support and funding, that it's important that these asks come from a diverse and perhaps unexpected range of people. Can you give an example of what you mean?
Yeah, so that's what we're intending to do for this federal election around the elections coming up. It has to be held before May 17th this year. We don't know exactly when that date will be, but once it's announced, we're going to be ready to go. What we're doing is, in the background, getting our band of troops together. I can't say who they are yet because we're not fully signed up, but we will be going to very unlikely partners to do this. We'd be hoping to be getting medical organisations, motoring groups. We want to see NGOs across climate, parents groups, teachers groups, et cetera, you name it. That we want the full gamut of different types of organisations to be signing up to this big ask. Because at the end of the day, everybody in our community is going to benefit from getting more people out walking and cycling, because there's going to be a whole lot of health benefits attached to that. At the moment, I think it's around $2.4 billion to the Australian government's health system just on physical inactivity as the direct health cost. It'll also benefit because it gets bikes off the road. So if you're frustrated with bike riders being on the road while you're driving, it gets them out of your way. If you're a pedestrian who's sick of having bikes sharing the footpath with you, particularly the e-bikes and so on, or delivery riders, it means that they're out of your way as well. So it will benefit everyone. But yes, we will have some strange bedfellows in there, and that's really important because that's how we're going to get the traction, because what we've done so far hasn't worked.
Some years ago, Sarah, you co-authored WRAPT, which became a federal government policy and ministerial statement. What do these initials stand for? And tell us a little bit about that. What impact did that document have as well?
So that stands for walking, riding and access to public transport. It was a policy statement that Albanese released when he was the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport in 2013. I think we released that policy. So that came out of when I was working at Infrastructure Australia, and we realised there is no active transport policy. There was a cycling strategy back then, which has been dropped by the Australian government. But this was really to say, what is the role of the Australian government when it comes to walking and cycling? And the big argument there is there are costs to the Australian government. When we talk about all those benefits, that $40 billion, that is mostly in health, which pretty much all falls to the Australian government. There's also climate change obligations that the Australian government has on the international arena. And because transport is 20% of all of our carbon emissions, it's going to be really important for the Australian government to focus on transport emissions and reducing that if we're going to get to net zero by 2050. So all of those things fall to the Australian government. And so that was part of the argument. And the other one is when you're investing in public transport, as you know, everyone has to walk or ride to get to the bus stop or to the train station. And so again, when you're thinking about investing in public transport, you also have to think about how people walk or ride to get there. And that's basically the thrust of what the paper says.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And is this still an official government policy, this document, or how has that evolved or morphed since 2013?
Well, let's just say when the Abbott government came in, I was told in a very utopian moment that the policy was not disendorsed. I think that meant that it was now unendorsed. Anyway, no, it's not current policy of the Australian government because there's been a different colour of government since then. Mm-hmm. But it would be great if it could be revived and refreshed.
Just moving on to an international stage, you're also a board member and treasurer of the World Cycling Alliance. Many of our listeners might not be aware of this organisation's existence. So can you very briefly summarise its background, current role and aims?
Yeah, the World Cycling Alliance is essentially, I guess, started by the European Cyclist Federation, but it represents the whole globe. So we've got a board that has one member from each continent. So I represent Oceania, and then we've got Europe, North America, South America, Africa, and the Eastern Asia as well. So we meet every quarter with the board, and we basically try to bring together the various perspectives of those various global organisations. So each of those continents then has their membership comprises of the cycling organisations within their country. So in Australia, that might be We Ride, for example, but actually any state-based organisation could also be a member. So Bicycle South Australia is. So essentially, that's sort of bringing all those organisations up to a single organisation that sits at the top of that, and it's registered as a charity based in Brussels. That's the long and the short of it, I guess.
Very good.
There's also a cycling and micro-mobility business case study I heard you have been involved in, Sarah. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that? What was your involvement and some of the key findings?
Yeah, so that's it's never been published. It was created by Transport for New South Wales as a business case. There were 33 councils involved in the co-design for that, which we won a Greater Cities Commission award for doing that sort of co-design with the 33 councils of Greater Sydney. And that did go through assurance with Infrastructure New South Wales in January 2020, just before COVID. And in fact, it became a really good basis for us to do the pop-up cycleways. So it was a pretty instrumental piece of work from that perspective. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't continued, but they may have used that as a business case to lodge with Infrastructure Australia to get it onto the priority list when it got revived. I don't know whether that's sort of behind closed doors. So I'm not aware whether that's been used for that component or not. But nonetheless, it basically said that if you build the cycling network for the whole of Greater Sydney, you'd be looking at about $6 billion worth for about 6,000 kilometres worth of cycling infrastructure network. That's your sort of trunk, so what they call Tier 1 and Tier 2 networks.
Okay.
At the current rate of funding by the state government, that would take 320 years to build that network.
Oh.
And this business case was saying that perhaps we could build it a little bit faster than that.
Oh, don't be too rash there, Sarah.
The sort of result of that was to say that largely for Western Sydney, that's all under development, the state government needs to make sure that this cycling infrastructure is delivered as part of all of that development occurs. So that needs sort of what they call a positive provision policy. And then we should be concentrating on Parramatta and Sydney centres in order to make sure that we're building comprehensive networks around that. That was the main conclusion of that work.
Well, look, it's been a very interesting conversation so far. Dare I say, very wonky for some people who are new to this whole field and so on. And clearly you're absolutely embedded in the trenches and have been for many years, which is why we were so keen to talk to you. So just as we start to wrap up, I just want to finish with something perhaps a little bit lighter and left field. One thing we just must mention is that not many Australians spend the first 9 years of their life growing up in a relatively remote part of Papua New Guinea. So why did you, and do you have any experience from your early childhood that have shaped the rest of your life?
Yes, I did grow up in a tiny little town called Madang. My parents were working as doctors in Madang. And there were so few doctors that, in fact, if you sent a letter to Papua New Guinea titled Dr. Stace with no address at all, it'd get to us.
Wow.
No, it was a really just a magical childhood to grow up in. It really was complete paradise, a wonderful place to be. And I went to the international school there, but most of my close friends were local kids from Papua New Guinea. I guess one of my memories was that we went to America on holidays because we couldn't buy anything in Papua New Guinea. You couldn't even buy chocolate. You couldn't buy ice cream because it would have melted on the wharf on its way to the shop once it came off the ship. So I remember we went to the US and we bought a bike for me. And we got home to Madang in Papua New Guinea, and my dad gave it 6 coats of rust-proof paint because it's in the tropics and we're right on the ocean. Things rusted within a few weeks. So he gave it many coats of paint, I was very impatient to get on the bike. And then I remember going for my first bike ride and went round and round the grass until my mum got pretty bored. And then I went riding up the gravel track and, of course, immediately came off and there was some pretty bad injury. But I guess I was hooked from there.
I think we've all got childhood memories, or many of us. I fell off on the way back from the bike shop on my first bike, riding on a main road with my parents nowhere in sight. How times have changed.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But, that must have been an amazing childhood. My grandfather was a civil engineer actually and worked in Papua New Guinea as well. So I heard lots of stories of his time there, and it does sound an amazing country, but very much less developed in a lot of ways as well. So beautiful people. Wow. So we've covered a lot of ground on the podcast today already, but Sara, I just wanted to check in with you. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you'd particularly like to make a brief comment about?
Yes, I guess that with the federal election coming up, as we've talked about, Better Streets is really ramping up our campaign. If you work for an organisation that you think would be interested in signing up, then you should go to the Better Streets website and there's a link there where you can sign up your organisation. You need to be very clear that you do have the authority of your organisation to proceed with signing us up to that. But that means that the name of your organisation will be added to our letter to all parties and candidates in Australia who are going for the federal election. And I guess as an individual, if you can also write to your MP saying that you support this ask for the federal election, then that would be absolutely fantastic for any candidates that you will be voting for in the election. So that's I guess, what I'd love to be able to get across. Noting again, we don't know exactly when the election is going to be, but it should be by the 17th of May at the very latest.
Fantastic. And it sounds like such an important platform because so much what we've talked about is the need to have political will to follow through on the investment that everybody already knows is needed. So what you're doing, Better Streets, sounds incredibly important from that perspective to help create that political will to drive this change through. So thank you, Sara, for all you're doing in this space. And it's so impressive to hear about just the sheer scope of what you're doing here in Australia and the impact that you're making. So
absolutely. Echo those sentiments 100%. And Sara Stace, thanks for squeaking.
You're welcome.
Well, Irene, what an amazing lady and what a busy schedule that Sara has.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just blown away. She really is a Wonder Woman, isn't she? Just the breadth of the things that she has worked on and the energy that she's bringing to this. I really hope that the Better Streets campaign can unlock the kind of funding that she's talking about with this ambition, because it would be transformational for Australia and so needed. So well done, Sara, and super inspiring just to speak with her today.
Yes, and we didn't even have time to touch on, but, she's got a family with 2 growing kids that she's raising, running a house and full-time career and professional roles. And on the side, she runs marathons, just did one in about 3 hours and 20 minutes or thereabouts, which is
that's what I mean.
Pretty
Wonder Woman.
Phenomenal.
I have kids as well and run a business, but I'm not throwing marathons in there just yet. So hats off to Sara for sure.
Absolutely. And the moral of that story is really, if any of us think that we're too busy to do anything, well, there's somebody that shows us that we're not.
If you want a job done, give it to a busy person, right?
Indeed. Speaking about busy people, now we always finish with our What's Up section, and I know you're a busy person, so what's up, Irene?
Yeah, so we had a great start to the new year, actually. We've had a really significant project win, which is always good, and this project's funded by EIT Urban Mobility, which is really like a European funding body specifically focused for urban mobility. And it's all about harnessing data to power new business models for the cycling industry. So we're going to be working with a micro-mobility operator called Mobi. The project will be based in Dublin, and we'll be looking at how this data can not only help cities for new infrastructure, insights, safety, that kind of thing, but also how we can help power insights for employers, looking at sustainability reporting, CO2 save, that kind of thing, And then also even the sort of fleet operational efficiencies like predictive maintenance and things like that. So there's a lot of new insights essentially that can come from using better data that can be collected on bikes. So a nice big chunky project to get our teeth into for the new year. We got a few projects in Dublin now, actually. So it's our third project in Dublin. So we're really getting quite embedded there. I'm also speaking at an upcoming event for ITS Australia on the 12th of February in Perth. So I'm going to be sharing some of the work we're doing in Australia. But I think one of the key themes that keeps coming out about this sort of world of ITS is this understanding that ITS is not just about moving cars around the city anymore. It's about moving people. So looking at how we use intelligent transport systems to make that shift. And I'll be talking about some of the work we're doing in that space here in Australia and around the world. And I'm also quite interested to check out this new Boorloo Bridge. Now, Sarah mentioned it. It's at $100 million. It's one of the $100 million chunks of investment that formed that 90 cents a head that Sarah was talking about. So quite keen to check it out. It only opened in December. And as you know, we had a recently opened Kangaroo Point Bridge in Brisbane. So with my local Brizzy hat on, I'm going to go and see what the Perth Bridge is like. And if it's any better than our bridge, I might take some photos and stick it on my socials as well for you all. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, we'll have to touch base on those socials and those photos because I've taken progress photos of both of those bridges being built. And so I'll have to get you to stand in the same spots so we can finish the progress photos.
Okay.
But, it's very interesting you say about that EIT project in Dublin because I'm busily doing my company directors course now. And one thing I've learned is that Australian companies progressively starting now for the largest companies, then rolling out to medium-sized and smaller companies, have to give detailed environmental impact statements as part of their annual report. So this is legislation that was passed a few years ago with a bit of a roll-in time, and that time is now finished. And as of now, the big companies have to do that. Then 1 year's time medium and 1 year's time smaller. So there might be a market for that sort of information even in Australia coming up soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing just quickly is I'm quite excited about a new partnerships that C-Sense has established with Bicycle Queensland kicking off this year. So what we're doing with that project is allowing cyclists to make reports about issues that concern them on their ride using the free C-Sense app. So no purchase of a C-Sense bike light is needed. Anybody can start using the app to make reports about potholes, close passes, other things that concern them. And we're going to be then embedding a dashboard on the Bicycle Queensland website so that all of those reports will become visible. And this will be a really nice tool for Bicycle Queensland to use in their advocacy, using data to help shine a light on some of the issues that cyclists face and hopefully allow Bicycle Queensland to be a bit of a squeaky wheel in asking for some more funding to address the issues.
Well, that's fantastic, Irene, and that's something that I'm sure, if successful, could be rolled out to all the other state advocacy organisations around Australia. So that's awesome. And speaking about other states, I've just returned a few days ago from the tour down under. And even if you're not a road cycling fan, there are so many street festivals, community rides and other activities that it's well worth a visit. The highlight for me was attending a fundraising event, first annual, hopefully, for World Bicycle Relief. So if you haven't heard of World Bicycle Relief, this is a wonderful global charity that I've been privileged to be involved with for about 15 years so far. Back then, I toured Zambia in Africa with the global founders, Leah and FK, who were from Chicago. And later, I founded World Bicycle Relief Australia at their request. At the Adelaide event, it was really gratifying to get updates from the current directors and staff and just hear what a fantastic job they're doing and how they've taken World Bicycle Relief Australia to the next level since I stepped down. Not to mention meeting Leah for the first time in many years. She came over from Chicago, so that was absolutely fantastic, a great night. So if you haven't heard of it, please visit World Bicycle Relief website and donate. They've sent over 850,000 purpose-built bicycles, which are actually built in country where they're used around the world, made in Africa. It's unbelievable charity. I love it. On a less positive note, I really don't support Santos being the naming rights sponsor of the Tour Down Under. In my opinion, it's a classic case of greenwashing, but at least it shows what a genuinely virtuous thing cycling is, that fossil fuel companies like Santos want to jump on the bandwagon. And looking to the future, I'll be heading back to Taipei Cycle next month. Taiwan is a country that's made massive strides in active travel since the last 28 years since I've started visiting Taipei, normally every year. But unbelievable country. I love that country. I love the people there. And really, they could teach Australia a lot. And finally, I've also just registered for Velocity in Gdansk, Poland this June. And I'm planning to visit a bunch of iconic active transport cities during that trip between Velocity finishing and Eurobike starting, which I normally go to every year. So there's a lot to look forward to. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up and see you next month.
Thanks for listening all the way to the end of this episode. If you want to see more, please visit squeakywheelpodcast.com or find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. We'd love to hear your feedback about future guests that you'd like to hear from, or any other suggestions that you'd like to make. You can contact us via any of our social media channels or by using the comments section of our website. We're planning to post a new episode of Squeaky Wheel on the second Thursday of every month.
If you're still listening to this, you've either been unable to turn off your device or you're a true fan. So please rate us, subscribe, and share Squeaky Wheel with your friends. We look forward to you joining us again next month. Until then, keep squeaking about the things that matter to you, because it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease.